Good morning, sports fans. Welcome to the 5th episode of Red Flag. I'm your host, Ricardo Middleton. Ryan is out again due to familial obligations, but you got me in. That's more than enough. So let's talk about the weekend. So I think last weekend's biggest storyline is the loss of Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a mild MCL sprain and a bone bruise. And if you watched Thursday Night Football last night, you saw the effects. Antonio Brown, a lot of people's number one pick in the draft, had a very lackluster performance. I mean, albeit Mike Vick was throwing pretty good in the first half, the second half didn't really show that. Antonio Brown missed the connection in the end zone, which, I mean, I can't even blame Vick for that when he put it on the money. I don't know. Antonio Brown doesn't drop that ball 9 times out of 10 when it's thrown from Ben Roethlisberger. For some reason, Michael Irvin thinks it has something to do with a left-hand spin versus a right-hand spin. I think it's a football, and if you're going to catch it, catch it. But yeah, unless your name is Le'Veon Bell, I don't think you're safe as a Steeler. They might readjust in the coming weeks to cater the game more to Michael Vick, so you'll see a lot more bubble screens, a lot more crossing patterns. Maybe get Vick some rhythm going forward, but tread softly if you're an Antonio Brown owner, Darius Hayward-Bay, Marcus Wheaton. Of course you're sitting Ben Roethlisberger for the next 4 to 6 weeks, but I think the only safe Pittsburgh start is a Le'Veon Bell, who had a pretty great night last night. Speaking of injury, the Cowboys experienced their first game with Brandon Weeden at the helm. And it was really a tale of two halves. The Cowboys' offensive line paved the way for Julius Randle to rush for 3 rushing touchdowns, had a monster first half. If for some reason Julius Randle was, let's say, in a trade that you were waiting to accept or decline, by halftime, you hit accept already. Then the second half happened, and Julio Jones happened, and Devontae Freeman happened. The Atlanta Falcons, went off. Ended up scoring a total of 38 points, and it looks like the Cowboys are in trouble. Hopefully they can take some good things away from the first half, continue the rushing attack. I trust a Joseph Randle going forward. I trust a Lance Dunbar going forward. But if you're a Cowboy receiver, I'm not so sold on you with Brandon Weeden throwing the football, even though he had a pretty good completion percentage. I think he threw around 23 of 26 balls. But, I mean, he really spread the wealth almost too thin. So tread softly with your Dallas wide receiver. So it may seem as though I'm beating this like a dead horse, but I'm going to say it again. The Raiders are the real deal. Derek Carr has weapons, guys. He's got an Amari Cooper, rookie wide receiver out of Alabama University. I took him in the 5th round. Some called me crazy, but I remember this young stud by the name of Julio Jones out of Alabama. You might have heard of him. Yeah, Amari Cooper's the real deal, guys. Derek Carr has Latavius Murray, who's an able back. I mean, you can trust his legs on the ground. He's going to get you 100 yards. Probably 8+ times this season. And the defense, I mean, I like the defense. The secondary's been a little suspect with Charles Woodson back there. I mean, he did get his interception in his 20th season or whatever stat that may be, but I love the front 7. I think that they can stop any rushing attack, but they just got to shore up the secondary. In a dogfight, which lasted to the very last play, Andrew Luck scratched out a win against Marcus Mariota, a mediocre Tennessee defense. I mean, Frank Gore got back on track, which is a good thing for fantasy owners. Can he sustain it? Not quite sure. I'm starting him this weekend because of circumstance, because Dion Lewis is on a bye. Come back soon, Dion Lewis. But you got to be encouraged by Andrew Luck and the Colts putting up 35 points against anybody. Hopefully that gets the ball rolling. And speaking of those juggernauts on a bye week, the Patriots took no mercy against the Jacksonville Jaguars, beating them 51-17. I don't have to tell you twice, start all your Patriots. Eagles were finally able to establish some semblance of a running game without their cash cow DeMarco Murray. Ryan Matthews led the way, with Darren Sproles picking up the slack. They got the win. Sam Bradford didn't have such a great outing, but I mean, a win is encouraging. I say that DeMarco, if he starts next weekend, is going to want to establish himself as the number one back, given Ryan Matthews' good performance. So start DeMarco, and perhaps start Ryan Matthews, because his outing's not going to go unnoticed by Chip Kelly. Darren Sproles is an every-week starter, in my opinion. He was tailor-made for that Chip Kelly offense, and you can't go wrong. Do I trust any Philadelphia receivers now? Not really, because I'm not so sold on Sam Bradford at the moment. So, yeah, don't play your Philadelphia Eagles receivers. Cam Newton rolled through this weekend onto a 3-0 record. Go Cam. I'm encouraged by it, but I'm also not going to overreact to it. It says more about the opponents Cam Newton has faced, who are the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are notoriously synonymous with mediocrity. The Houston Texans, who can't seem to find themselves on offense, are breaking in a new quarterback, 2 new quarterbacks. Great defense, so kudos to Cam for that. And a victory against the New Orleans Saints, who had their substitute teacher in Luke McCown leading the way. So, while I'm excited for Cam being 3-0 and leading his division, I'm not going to overreact to wins against those opponents. But do yourself a favor and start Cam Newton. Greg Olsen too. Adrian Peterson turned 20 carries into 126 yards, 2 touchdowns. I guess he's not over the hill. I guess he's not too old. I guess he just needed more carries, huh? Yeah. It does not hurt me to say that Colin Kaepernick is an embarrassment. The Cardinals' defense forced 4 picks out of him. I don't believe Colin Kaepernick threw for more than 100 yards. 2 of those picks were pick sixes. And there were 8 tackles for loss, which I'm sure more than a few were sacks. Says a lot about San Francisco. Means you can't really trust their receivers. Week 1 said that we could trust Carlos Hyde, but weeks 2 and 3 said not so much. Something's got to shake up in San Francisco, and start your Arizona defense every week. Every week. Yeah, Ryan. Buffalo is 2-1. Tyrod Taylor throws for 3 touchdowns. Carlos Williams rushes for 110 yards. Am I a prophet? I won't go that far, but I'm not too far away. The defense held Tannehill to 14 points, 3 interceptions, and a QBR of 11.7. God, when I'm right, I'm right. Buffalo is the real deal. Thank you, Rex Ryan, for finding a home that's compatible to your style. Cam Chancellor returned to the Seattle defense, and they get their first shutout of the season. I mean, albeit against a Chicago team with Jimmy Clausen at the helm, who, as a starter, has been 1-11, I believe. But hey, a shutout is a shutout. hard to do against professionals in this league, even if their name's Jimmy Clausen. It's safe to start your Seattle defense now, guys. The quarterback in the backfield is back. Aaron Rodgers was nothing short of perfect in the Monday Nighter against Kansas City. I thought Kansas City might have the tools on defense to make it a little hard for him, but he proved me wrong. Threw for 333 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 of which connected to a Randall Cobb. What else can I say? He's Aaron Rodgers. So now that we've got the recap out the way, I want to talk about some of the players that you're hoping will hit, but feels like you're holding on to them for a little too long, and you're wondering whether or not you should drop them, or hopefully even trade them. Which brings us to the C.J. Andersons of the world, the Andre Johnsons, Victor Cruz, Jeremy Hill, any San Francisco receiver that you thought was going to be something, and old man Roddy White. So with C.J. Anderson, he's looked pretty terrible through 3 games. Every single game he's exited at some point with some type of injury. Gone back in, but it just seems like he can't get out of his own way. He's always nicked up. Dare I say, Derrick Rose of Denver Broncos. But I have faith, or at least I'm kind of forced to have faith, because I, too, am a C.J. Anderson owner. I think that he's going to break through this slump. I think that a decent running back and Ronnie Hillman behind him, pushing him to be better, is going to give CJ a little added motivation. And I think that Denver drew some pretty decent rush defenses for their first 3 games. I think you give CJ Anderson another 1 to 2 weeks before you start to hit those buttons. Comes to Andre Johnson, I say cut your losses. Andre's over the hill. Pains me to say that the one that used to dazzle us with back corner end zone catches, he's done. He's done. The Colts tried to cash in on a big name, and it backfired on them. Andre is not as fast as he used to be. He's not as quick as he used to be. He's not as agile as he used to be. He's dropping balls. He's not getting out of his breaks. I think it's safe to say that you can try to sell low on Andre for somebody that needs a wide receiver, but it looks like he's destined for waiver wires, and that hurts me to say. Speaking of somebody that should be on the waiver wire, Victor Cruz, the walking wounded, the Derrick Rose of the NFL. It seems like every time Victor Cruz is about to suit up again, his calf flares up. I say you cut your losses with Victor Cruz if you're holding on to him thinking that you're going to get some sort of added value later on into the season. It's not worth it. It's really a headache and a waste of a roster position. Eli Manning has plenty of able-bodied receivers. Odell Beckham, Ruben Randall, Larry Donnell, Preston Parker, even Shane Vereen. And no one's going to wait around for Victor Cruz's calf to heal, especially in an NFC East where the divisional title is going to be up for grabs. No one's waiting for Victor Cruz to get better. Cut your losses. When it comes to a Jeremy Hill, who's had 41 attempts for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns through his 3 weeks of play, got outplayed last weekend by Giovanni Bernard. I think it might be just a hair too soon to give up on Jeremy Hill. I think that there's a lot more yards down the road for him. I think maybe he's dealing with some demons right now, especially with Giovanni Bernard being back in the backfield pushing him. But we all know that Jeremy Hill has the talent, and given our 3-game sample space, I think it might be a little too soon to cut ties with Jeremy Hill, so hold on to him for maybe 1 to 2 more weeks, see what Cincy does in the next week or two, and then make your decision on Jeremy Hill. But don't cut your ties too soon. But in the case of any San Francisco 49er receiver, you can go ahead and put them all on the waiver wire. Colin Kaepernick just looks god-awful right now, and I don't see it getting any better. They're breaking in a new coach there, and, I mean, Kaepernick's still, in my opinion, kind of a diva. Vernon Davis, Torrey Smith, Anquan Bolden. It's pretty safe to say you can drop all of those. I mean, if anyone wants to bite on a trade and you have a sucker in your league, go ahead and put the bait out there, but I wouldn't take it. So the last person I want to talk about in this segment is a Roddy White, who's being supremely overshadowed by a Julio Jones who's having a historic year. He's going to break some records this year, in my opinion. But Roddy White through 3 games has 4 receptions and 84 yards, no touchdowns. He's 33 years old. A lot of miles on those legs. Cut your ties with Roddy White. It's over. It's over. There's a young receiver in Leonard Hankerson who's starting to eat up those targets, trying to establish himself as the wide receiver 2 in Atlanta, and he's doing a pretty bang-up job. Yeah, I mean, Roddy used to be one of Matt Ryan's security blankets with Tony Gonzalez. Where's Tony Gonzalez now, though? He's retired. Hint, hint, Roddy White. The next topic I want to talk about, it's a little debate going on, kind of a hot topic. Who's the better receiver? Julio Jones or Antonio Brown? This debate's not really stemmed from my genesis. I don't think it's fair to compare the two. I mean, to me, it's apples to oranges. Julio Jones is in a category with the Dez Bryants, the Calvin Johnsons, the Brandon Marshalls, the Larry Fitzgeralds, those big, strong, fast receivers that can really go up and get it. I mean, if it weren't for maybe 20 pounds less, you could consider all of them tight ends. And Antonio Brown, who's 5'10", and he's got this rare combination of speed and quickness and athleticism, in my opinion, is really a glorified slot receiver that can kind of move to the outside if need be, because of his ability to just outright beat you downfield. Antonio Brown is more of the type of receiver like a Odell Beckham and Emmanuel Sanders or Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb and Emmanuel Sanders generally play in the slot, but they do have the ability and the quickness to move outside, and the strength. Julio Jones right now, through 3 games, has 34 receptions, 440 yards, and 4 touchdowns, which really would put him on pace for some obscene amount of receptions, yards, touchdowns, something we've never seen before, something in the range of 180 catches, well over 2,000 yards, and somewhere like 21 touchdowns. I mean, no one's going to be able to sustain this pace, and hopefully, we don't expect him to. Hopefully he does, though, for fantasy owners like me. Through 4 games, Antonio Brown has clocked in 34 receptions himself, 478 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Antonio's racking up yardage and racking up receptions, not so much of a threat in the red zone as Julio, but effective. Like I said, in my opinion, comparing Antonio Brown to Julio Jones is apples to oranges. They're not the same receiver, and they shouldn't be compared. Julio Jones is at the top of his game. Antonio Brown is at the top of his game. Let's just respect what we're saying. I'm going to give you guys a preview of this upcoming weekend so that you guys can get those fantasy rosters set. Which brings me to the Giants versus the Bills. I don't like any Giant running back not named Vereen this weekend. Buffalo can stop the run. They will stop the run. Eli is going to be forced into some pretty bad throws, which spells Shane Vereen. Shane Vereen is very capable of catching the ball out of the backfield and turning those -1 yard dump offs into 10, 15, 20 yards. So I like Shane Vereen in this game. You've got to start Odell Beckham anytime you have Odell Beckham on your roster. On the Buffalo side, start your defense. Sammy Watkins looks like he's going to be out, so start your Percy Harvin, start Robert Woods. Start Charles Clay, tight end. And it makes me very happy to say start Tyrod Taylor. He's waited around in the AFC North behind Joe Flacco, waiting his turn, and his time is now. I'm happy to say start Tyrod Taylor. So we've got the NFC East divisional matchup, Philadelphia versus the Washington Redskins. Hurricane Joaquin's not going to postpone the festivities, so let's dive in. Yes, you can start Jordan Reed. Look at the numbers. I've been right since week 1. You can start Jordan Reed, fantasy sleeper. Check red flag episode 1. Outside of that, I like Matt Jones. I think that Alfred Morris is going to have something to say this weekend about a young Matt Jones coming in to take his job. Look for him to get some decent yardage this weekend. I've never liked a Washington Redskin receiver. Pierre Garçon might be the best choice there. On the Philadelphia side of the ball, I'm not too secure with a DeMarco Murray starting. I think he's going to have a bounce back game, but I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. There's Ryan Matthews there, there's Darren Sproles there, and those two seem to work together very well. DeMarco's going to want to prove his worth. That can go one of two ways. He's going to be boom or bust this weekend, I'm sad to say. I don't like Philadelphia's receivers. I don't like Philadelphia's quarterback, even though they both have a lot to prove. So, Philadelphia running backs, you can start. Don't start any Philadelphia receivers. Let's see. I want to talk about the Atlanta-Houston game because Devontae Freeman is on a tear. 3 touchdowns last week against what we thought was a decent Dallas defense. Let's see what he does against Houston's D-line. Oh, God. It might be the best D-line in football with J.J. Watt on one side, Vince Wilfork in the middle, and Jadeveon Clowney on the other side. If Devontae Freeman can survive that defensive line, then I'll go ahead and say he's an every-week starter. I'm also interested to see what Julio Jones does because, we're witnessing history. So, Devontae's a good start. Julio, no-brainer. Matt Ryan. Leonard Hankerson, if you're in a really deep league, Leonard Hankerson might be a great start, especially with Julio getting added attention. If there's double teams going Julio's way, there's another safety dropping over to Julio's side, Leonard Hankerson is going to benefit. On the Houston side of things, is Arian Foster going to come back this weekend? Maybe. If he does, I really don't like it. It's his first game back. He might explode, but, does Houston really have any other viable options outside of him? DeAndre Hopkins is going to get some points, but, you can only go so far with Ryan Mallett throwing you the ball. So, If Arian Foster's ready to go ahead and give him the start. DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Freeman, Julio Jones, Leonard Hankerson, Matt Ryan. So, if you're the person that likes defensive struggles, if you were a fan of that great Alabama LSU game of old that ended 9-6, then I've got the game for you. St. Louis Rams versus the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona has some firepower, but they're facing a great Rams defense, and St. Louis doesn't have any firepower, and they're facing a great Arizona defense. So I expect a very low-scoring game, a lot of field goals, so start your Rams and Cards kickers. Andre Ellington might return. Don't think he's going to see any points, so I wouldn't start him. You kind of have to start Larry Fitzgerald if you have him, but I don't expect big numbers like he's put up in previous weeks. St. Louis, I don't like Todd Gurley, never have, probably never will. But you can probably go ahead and start your St. Louis and Arizona defenses. That's going to be a safe bet. Adrian Peterson travels this week to Mile High to square off with Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos. In this game, I think that Minnesota has an able enough defense and a good enough running attack to control the ball in Denver this weekend. Does that spell a Minnesota victory? I'm not quite sure. I mean, if you watched episodes 1 through 4, you know I'm not too high on Peyton Manning. And I'm crazy about Adrian Peterson. So, start Adrian Peterson. Gotta go with Emmanuel Sanders in the slot. Gotta go with Demaryius Thomas every week. Pay attention to what C.J. Anderson does if you're an owner like this guy. But I think this game is going to be really close, and I see Denver edging it because they've got a clutch performer in Peyton Manning. I want to discuss Dallas versus New Orleans, two teams that are in desperate need of a W. Dallas, you can go ahead and start your running backs. It is safe to start Joseph Randle. It is safe to start Lance Dunbar. I don't know about Christine Michael yet. I don't know about Darren McFadden yet, but those two are safe bets. I don't like any Dallas receiver. Brandon Wheaton has not built a rapport with any one specific receiver. I mean, Terrence Williams to me is his best option outside of Jason Witten, and neither of those really sparkled last weekend. On New Orleans side, I think that Drew Brees needs a big game, and he's going to get a big game. So it's safe to start him. I'd go ahead and start Brandon Cooks, even though he hasn't performed up to par yet. Your Saints running backs, who Drew Brees makes a habit of throwing to, are also pretty safe bets. I like New Orleans in this game, even though Dallas has the better offensive line and a slightly better running attack. But I like New Orleans. I think Drew Brees tries to get things back on track this weekend. So, yeah, start Drew Brees. So a question I've been getting all week long. Is it safe to start Calvin Johnson against the Seattle Seahawks defense? No. Calvin has lost a step, guys. I mean, your casual fan will think that I've lost my mind, but anybody who's watched Calvin the last 2 years knows that Calvin's not what he used to be. And he's facing a revitalized Seahawks defense who just got their quarterback on defense, Cam Chancellor, back. No, it's not a safe start to start Calvin Johnson. I mean, if you have him, I think you kind of have to, but don't expect many points from him. The only player for Detroit I like this weekend is Amir Abdullah, and I might like Eric Ebron. I say that with my teeth clenched, but something about Seattle's defense says that tight ends can score. Tight ends will get receptions. They're going to give up that intermediate pass. You're not going to get any deep balls on Seattle, but that intermediate pass is going to be there, and I think Eric Ebron is going to be the recipient. Maybe Golden Tate if he can shake a Richard Sherman. I don't like Matt Stafford in this game. I like every Seahawk player that you have. That's not a receiver. Had to add that last part. Go ahead and start Jimmy Graham. Go ahead and fire up Marshawn if he's healthy. If not, there's a Thomas Rawls on the waiver wire. Not on my waiver wire because I already picked him up, but there's a Thomas Rawls, and if Marshawn's not ready to go, thank me later, he's going to get you points. Russell Wilson's always a safe start. Go ahead and fire him up. If you've been watching this long, you're probably wondering why I'm wearing a Kevin Garnett Timberwolves jersey. The NBA preseason is upon us. Sorry, football fans, but basketball is indeed my first love. And I gotta preview it. Go on for hours talking about this NBA offseason and all its happenings, but I really just want to hit the high points, give you some things to think about going into this NBA season. Can the Warriors repeat? Did the Cavs do enough in the offseason to get back where they finished off last season? Are the Chicago Bulls in a better place with a different coach? What can we expect from Kobe Bryant and this young Lakers team? Did the Rockets do enough signing a Ty Lawson but getting rid of a Josh Smith? Is this Doc Rivers' last year to prove himself? And are the Miami Heat legitimate title contenders? Are the San Antonio Spurs the most stacked team in all of basketball? Can Phil Jackson right the New York Knicks ship? And is this the last year we see Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant in the same jersey? It's only preseason, but I'm going to be thinking about these things for the next week or so, watching preseason basketball. And so should you. Thanks again for watching, sports fans. Tweet me at Ricardo Middleton, no N at the end. Any fantasy questions that you have, any advice that you are seeking. Tune in next week for episode 6 of Red Flag. Bye.